In this unit, we are going to discuss on the important movements that happen in state politics which shape the state politics in its intents. The first movement that we are going to see is the non-Brahmin movement. The non-Brahmin movement was a socio-political movement aimed at challenging Brahmins' dominance in colonial South India. It sought to address the social inequalities and injustice faced by the non-Brahmin communities, advocating for their rights and representation in education, politics, and administration. The movement emerged during British rule in India, a period marked by significant social and political changes. As non-Brahmin communities began to gain access to education and economic opportunities, they sought to assert their rights against the entrenched power of the Brahmins, who were perceived as the dominant social class. Colonial influence. The British colonial administration played a complex role in the evolution of non-Brahmin movement. While some historians argue that British policies encouraged the growth of non-Brahmin identities as a counterbalance to Brahmin influence, others contend that the movement arose from long-standing social cleavages and grievances. The British often appointed non-Brahmins to government positions as a part of strategy to dismiss Brahmin dominance in administrative role. Socioeconomic challenges. The late 19th and 20th century saw increasing awareness among non-Brahmin communities regarding their socio-economic status. With great access to education, these groups began organizing politically to demand representation in equality. This culminated in the formation of political parties that specifically represented non-Brahmin interests, most notably the Justice Party established in 1916. Prominent leaders such as E.V. Ramasamy Naikar emerged as significant intellectuals behind the movement. Advocating the social reforms and the rights of non-Brahmin, the movement also drew inspiration from earlier social reforms like Jyotiba Phule in Maharashtra, who challenged caste hierarchies and advocated for these rights of marginalized communities. The non-Brahmin movement was a critical response to the socio-political dynamics of colonial South India, reflecting broader struggles against caste-based hierarchies and advocating for equality among diverse communities. By challenging Brahmin dominance, it laid the groundwork for future political mobilization and social reform movement in India. Understanding this movement is essential for comprehending contemporary issues related to caste, identity, and regional politics in India today. Theoretical background of non-Brahmin movement. The influencing factor which the non-Brahmin movement in India was shaped by various factors that contributed to its emergence and evolution. Understanding these influences provides insights into the socio-political landscape of colonial South India. The impact of British administrative reforms played a significant role in exposing caste inequalities within Indian society. British colonial policies introduced new administrative structure that highlighted existing social hierarchies. The recruitment of individuals into government positions based on merit rather than caste began to challenge the traditional dominance of Brahmins in administration and education. Awareness of inequality. The exposure to Western ideas of inequality and justice led to increased awareness among non-Brahmins regarding their marginalized status. These awareness catalyzed movements aimed at challenging Brahmin supremacy and advocacy for social justice. Social inequality. The overrepresentation of Brahmins in government, education, and professions further fuel discontent among non-Brahmin communities. Caste-based disparities. The dominance of Brahmins in key sector created significant socioeconomic disparities. Non-Brahmin groups, including various backward classes, castes, and communities, faced systematic discrimination and were often excluded from educational and employment opportunities. Mobilization for equality. This inequality promoted non-Brahmin community to mobilize politically, demanding representation and equal access to resources. The movement sought to dismantle the entrenched caste system that perpetuated Brahmin dominance. Intellectual inspiration. The non Brahmin movement drew inspiration from various social reformers and the impact of Western education, which played a crucial role in shaping its ideology. Jyotiba Phule's contribution. Jyotiba Phule emerged as a prominent intellectual leader within the movement. His writing and activism laid the groundwork for challenging caste hierarchies. Phule's establishment of the Satyasod Samaj focused on social justice and the rights of marginalized communities, providing a framework for the non Brahmin movement. Western education influences. The introduction of Western education facilitated access to new idea about democracy, equality, and social reform. Many leaders of non-Brahmin movement were educated in Western-style institutions, which equipped them with the knowledge and tools necessary to critique traditional social structures and advocate for change. The theoretical background of non-Brahmin movement is rooted in a combination of colonial modernity, social inequality, and intellectual inspiration from reformers like Jyotiba Phule. These influence factors collectively contributed to the emergence of movement that sought to challenge Brahmin's dominance and promote social justice in colonial South India. Understanding these dynamics is essential for analyzing the broader implications of non-Brahmin movement on contemporary Indian society and politics. Objectives of non-Brahmin movement. The non-Brahmin movement emerged as a significant socio-political force in colonial South India, aiming to address a systematic inequality perpetuated by the caste system and Brahmin dominance. The movement had several key objectives that sought empower marginalized communities and promote social justice. Below are the primary objectives of the non-Brahmin movement. Social equality. A fundamental objective of non-Brahmin movement was to challenge caste hierarchy and empower marginalized groups. Dismantling caste discrimination, the movement aimed to dismantle the entrenched caste system that privileged Brahmin over non-Brahmin communities. By advocating for social equality, the movement sought to eliminate practices such as untouchability and promote the rights of all individuals regardless of their caste. Empowerment of marginalized communities, the movement focused on empowering various non Brahmin communities, including backward castes and Dalits, by advocating for their social rights and representations. This empowerment was crucial for fostering a more inclusive society where all individuals could participate equally. Another critical objective was to ensure fair access to job and economic resources for non Brahmin communities. Equal employment opportunity. The non Brahmin sought to address the economic disparities faced by non Brahmins due to the overrepresentation of Brahmins in government jobs and professions. By demanding equal access to employment opportunities, the movement aimed to create a level playing field for all communities. The movement also focused on advocating for equitable distribution of resources and economic benefits. This includes pushing for policies that would ensure non Brahmin communities received fair access to land, education, and financial support. Increasing the participation of non Brahmin in legislative and administrative positions was a pivotal goal of the movement. The non Brahmin movement aimed to mobilize non Brahmin communities to actively participate in political process. This included promoting awareness about voting rights and encouraging individuals from marginalized backgrounds to contest elections. Representation in governance. By striving for greater political representation, the movement sought to ensure that legislative bodies reflected the diversity of Indian society. This representation was essential for addressing local issues and advocating for policies and benefited non-Brahmin communities. The objectives of non-Brahmin centered around achieving social equality, economic justice, and political representation for marginalized groups in South India. By challenging Brahmin dominance and advocating for systematic reforms, the movement played a crucial role in reshaping the social political landscape of colonial India. Its legacy constitutes to influence contemporary discussions on caste, identity, and representation in Indian society today. Achievements of non Brahmin movements, which emerged as a significant socio political force in colonial South India, achieved several milestones that profoundly impacted the social, political, and cultural landscape of the region. The first milestone can be stated as the political milestone, establishment of Justice Party founded in 1916. The Justice Party was a pivotal political organization that aimed to promote non-Brahmin interests. It provided a platform for various non-Brahmin communities to voice their concerns and aspirations, marking a significant shift in the political dynamics of South India. Dominance in Madras Presidency. The Justice Party held power in Madras Presidency from 1916 to 1937, during which it implemented policies that favored non Brahmin communities. This period marked a significant political milestone as it challenged the traditional dominance of Brahmins in governance and administrations. Reservation policies. One of the most notable achievements of the non-Brahmin movement was the introduction of reservation policies in education and public employment. These policies aim to provide equitable access to opportunities of non-Brahmin communities and other marginalized groups, helping to address historical injustice. Increased awareness of caste based inequality. The movement played a crucial role in raising awareness about caste based inequality and injustice. Through advocacy and mobilization, it educated people about their rights and the need for social reform, fostering a greater understanding of the systematic issues affecting non Brahmins. Advocacy for Dravidian identity. The non Brahmin movement championed the cause of Dravidian identity, promoting pride in Tamil culture and heritage. This cultural assertion was vital for fostering a sense of belonging and unity among non Brahmin community. Promotion of Tamil cultural pride. The movement encouraged the celebration and preservation of Tamil language and culture, countering the perceived dominance of Brahm, Brahminal, Brahminical culture. This cultural revival contributed to a broader recognition and appreciation of a regional identity within India. The achievement of non-Brahmin movement were instrumental in reshaping the socio-political landscape of South India by establishing political representation for non-Brahmins, advocating for social justice through reservation policies, and promoting cultural pride. The movement laid a foundation for ongoing struggles against caste-based discriminations. Its legacy constitutes to influence contemporary discussion on identity, representation, and social equity in India today. Caste class dichotomy in the non Brahmin movement. The non Brahmin movement, while primarily focused on challenging Brahmin's dominance, also highlighted significant issues related to the interplay between caste and class. This dichotomy reveals complexities in the movement's objectives and outcomes, particularly regarding its impact on various social groups. Class dynamics. One of the central aim of non-Brahmin movement was to reduce Brahmin dominance in society. However, this focus often overlooked the plight of Dalits and over-oppressed class. Limited scope of equality. The movement primarily addressed the grievances of non-Brahmin communities, particularly those who were economically better off. As a result, the concern of Dalit and marginalized group within the broader non-Brahmin category were frequently sidelined. This selective approach meant that while Brahmin hegemony was challenged, Deeper systematic inequalities affecting the most oppressed caste remain unaddressed. Caste hierarchies. The movement emphasized on elevating non-Brahmins did not necessarily translate into a commitment to dismantling caste hierarchies altogether. Instead, it often reinforced existing social stratifications by prioritizing certain non-Brahmin group over other, leading to a fragmented approach to social justice. The non Brahmin movement also had implications for class dynamic, benefiting wealthier land owning non Brahmin while neglecting poorer groups. Economic benefits of elites. The policies and political representations gained through the movement primarily favored economically advantaged non Brahmins such as landowners and business elites. This created a scenario where wealthier classes within the non Brahmin community benefits of political power and economic opportunities, while poorer non Brahmins and Dalit continued to face socio-economic challenges, neglect of lower classes. The movement focus on caste equality often came at the expense of broader socio-economic reforms that could have benefited lower classes individuals across various castes. By not addressing class disparity directly, the movement missed an opportunity to forge alliances with poor communities who were struggling against both caste and economic oppressions. The non Brahmin movement faced criticism for its approach to social reform, particularly regarding its focus on caste equality at the cost of broader socio-economic reforms. Narrow focus on caste. Critics argue that by concentrating primarily on caste issue, the movement failed to engage with essential economic and class struggles. This narrow focus limited its effectiveness in addressing systematic inequalities that transcend caste lines and affected all marginalized groups. The movement's achievement in promoting non Brahmin interests did not necessarily translate into comprehensive reforms that would uplift all disadvantaged communities. As a result, many critics contend that while it succeeded in challenging Brahmin's hegemony, it did not adequately address the underlying socio-economic issue that perpetuated inequality in Indian society. The caste class dichotomy within the non Brahmin movement revealed significant complexities regarding its objectives and impacts. While it effectively challenged Brahmin's dominance and promoted non Brahmin interests, it often overlooked the needs of Dalits and poorer non Brahmins. Additionally, it focused on caste equality, sometimes came at the expense of broader socio-economic reforms necessarily for achieving comprehensive social justice. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for analyzing the legacy of non-Brahmin movement and its implications for contemporary discussion on caste and class in India. Justice Party, formation, objectives, achievements, and challenges. Formation and objectives. The Justice Party, officially known as South Indian Liberation Federation, was established on November 20, 1916 in the Victoria Public Hall in Madras. It was founded by prominent leaders including Dr. T.M. Nair, C. Natesa Mudaliar, and P. Tyagaraja Chetty in response to the systematic inequality faced by non-Brahmin communities in Madras presidency. The primary objective of the Justice Party include promoting the education, social, economic, political, and moral progress of all communities in southern India other than Brahmins, making genuine representation to the government regarding the views and interests of non-Brahmin communities. Disseminating sounds and liberal view through public lecture and literature to foster public opinion in favor of non Brahmin rights. The Justice Party made significant contribution to the socio-political landscape of South India during its active years. Communal representation, one of its landmark achievements was the implementation of communal representation in government jobs, which ensured that non-Brahmins had a fair chance at employment in public services. Advocacy for welfare policies. The party advocated for various public health, education, and welfare policies aimed at improving the living conditions of non Brahmin communities. This this included efforts to enhance educational opportunities and access to healthcare services. Political milestones. The Justice Party won a majority in first election under the diarchy system in 1920 and formed the government, marking a significant political milestone for non-Brahmins in the region. Challenges faced by non-Brahmin women. Despite its achievement, the Justice Party faced several challenges that ultimately led to its decline. Elitism. The party was criticized for its elites tendencies as it primarily represented wealthier land-owning non-Brahmins. This focus alienated poorer groups within the non-Brahmin community who felt their needs were not adequately addressed. Lack of grassroots support. The party struggled to maintain grassroots support as it became increasingly disconnected from the broader population. Its instability to engage effectively with lower socio-economic classes limited its influence and reach. Decline in popularity. By the 1930s, the rise of the Indian National Congress and its focus on national independence overshadowed caste based agendas. Additionally, the Justice Party's association with British colonial governance during India's struggle for independence further alienated it from growing nationalist sentiments. By 1944, it transformed into the Dravidar Kazhagam, marking a shift away from its original objectives. The Justice Party played a pivotal role in advocating for non Brahmin interests in colonial South India. Through its efforts to promote social justice and political representation, it significantly influenced the social political landscape of the region. However, challenges related to elitism and grassroots disengagement ultimately led to its decline. Understanding the legacy of Justice Party is essential for comprehending subsequent movements that emerged in South India, particularly those focused on Dravidian identity and social reforms. Anti-Hindi agitation in Madras province. The anti-Hindi agitation in the Madras province emerged as a response to the attempt by British and Congress government to impose Hindi as a national language in schools. The agitation began in earnest in 1937 when the Indian National Congress led by C. Rajagopalachari introduced compulsory Hindi teaching in schools across Madras Presidency. This move was met with immediate resistance from various sections of society, particularly from non-Brahmin community who viewed it as an imposition on their linguistic and cultural identity. Protests. The protests against Hindi imposition were led initially by the Justice Party and later gained momentum under the leadership of Dravidian leaders like Periyar E.V. Ramasamy. Methods of protest. The agitation involved a range of activities including fasts, conferences, marches, picketing of schools teaching Hindi, and public demonstrations. Notable events included the first anti Hindi imposition conference in Kanchipuram in 1938 and a significant anti Hindi march from Tiruchirappalli to Chennai. Government crackdowns. The protests were met with severe repression from the government. Over the course of the agitation, police violence resulted in the deaths of two protesters and led to the arrest of approximately 1,198 individuals, including women and children. The brutal police response galvanized public sentiments against Hindi imposition. Outcomes. The agitation culminated in February 1940 when Governor Lord Erskine withdrew the mandatory teaching of Hindi in schools, making it optional instead. This victory was seen as a significant achievement of the movement and strengthened sentiments of Tamil identity. The impact of anti Hindi agitation. The anti-Hindi, the anti-Hindi agitation had profound implication for Tamil identity and regional politics. Strengthening Tamil identity, the protests fostered a sense of solidarity among Tamil speakers and reinforced their cultural identity. The movement highlighted the importance of linguistic rights and set a precedent for future demands for autonomy based on language. Foundation for Dravidian movement. The agitation laid the groundwork for the broader Dravidian movement, which sought to promote Dravidian identity and oppose perceived cultural imposition by northern Indian powers. This movement would later evolve into significant political force like Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam. Formation of linguistic states. The resistance against Hindi imposition contributed to discussion around linguistic states in India post independence. It underscored the need for state to be formed based on linguistics, demographics, leading to the recognition of state along linguistic lines in 1956. The anti Hindi agitation in Madras province were pivotal in shaping regional identity and political discourse in Tamil Nadu. They represented a significant challenge to cultural imposition and highlighted the importance of linguistic rights within India's diverse social fabric. The legacy of these agitations continues to influence contemporary politics, particularly discussions surrounding language identity and regional autonomy in India today. Legacy of non-Brahmin movement. The non-Brahmin movement went emerged in the early 20th century in South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, has left a lasting legacy that continues to influence contemporary social and political dynamics. Its long-term contribution and criticisms reveal both its achievements and limitations. Long-term contributions. One of the most significant legacy of non-Brahmin movement is the introduction of reservation policy in education and public employment. These policies were designed to ensure that non-Brahmin community, especially those historically marginalized, and access to educational institutions and government jobs. This was a crucial step towards achieving social equality and representation of non-Brahmins in various sectors. Inspiration of Dravidian movement. The non-Brahmin movement served as a foundational influence for the Dravidian movement, which sought to promote Dravidian identity and challenge the cultural dominance of Brahmins. Leaders like E.V. Ramasamy built upon the princ- principles established by the non-Brahmin movement, advocating for social reforms, rationalism, and self-respect among Tamils. This paved the way for regional political parties such as Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam and All India Anna Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, which continue to play a significant role in Tamil Nadu politics today. Narrow focus on elite non-Brahmin interests. Despite its achievements, the non-Brahmin movement had faced criticism for primarily representing the interests of elite Brahminism, such as landlords and educated professionalism. This focus often marginalized poorer non-Brahmin communities, including Dalits and other lower castes, who continued to face systematic discrimination and socio-economic challenges, neglecting Dalits and women. The movement's emphasis on caste equality frequently overlooked the specific issues faced by Dalits and women within non-Brahmin communities. While it aimed to dismantle Brahminical dominance, it did not adequately address broader socio-economic reform necessarily for uplifting all marginalized groups. As a result, many critics argued that while it succeeded in challenging Brahmin's hegemony, it failed to create comprehensive framework for social justice that included all layers of society. The legacy of non-Brahmin movement is multi-phase, marked by significant contributions to social justice through reservation policy and the inspiration it provided for subsequent movements advocating regional identity and rights. However, its limitations in addressing the needs of poorer non-Brahmin and marginalized groups highlighting ongoing challenges within caste-based politics in India. Understanding this legacy is essential for analyzing contemporary issues related to caste, class, and identity in Indian society today.